folks, Tom Vasel here with the Board Game Breakfast. Now, for those of you who've been paying attention, you will notice that Board Game Breakfast did not show up last week, and for that I'm very sorry, but we were moving into a new house, and with the baby and everything, it was just entirely too chaotic. However, at this point in time, we are in our new digs, and while they're not perfectly done yet, I hope that you can already tell that the lighting is a little bit better here. And I have a new camera that I'm using, and pretty soon I'll have two cameras, and so hopefully as time goes by, things are going to get better for Board Game Breakfast and the Dice Tower in general. But anyhow, since I was gone for 2 weeks here, there is a ton of news, so let's get to that. So much news here. First of all, Steve Jackson has announced later this year they're coming out with a Mars Attack dice game. Now, this game is going to, it looks like it's similar to Zombie Dice with some added variations to that. Zombie Dice is still very popular. I just saw some folks playing it at my meetup this past Saturday. Strike a Pose from R&R Games. This is the lost fourth round of Time's Up. In Time's Up, you try to get people to guess things by first giving them clues, then one-word clues, and then just sounds and pantomiming. The fourth round was the other person closed their eyes, and then you would strike a pose, and they would have to guess from that pose what you were trying to, the clue. Well, this whole game is based around that, and so it's called Strike a Pose. USAopoly has risked the Dalek invasion. Apparently in this one, you're not any of the good guys. You're 5 different Dalek armies trying to take over the Earth, and the Doctor shows up and does all sorts of things. I'm sure lots of people will buy that. Out of the Box Publishing has announced 2 expansions for Snake Oil, Party Potion, and then Elixir, which is not only just another expansion, but a standalone game. So apparently Snake Oil has done very well. It's a game where you make up stories to try to sell stuff to people. Portal has put up some artwork. You can see some of that here for Runes, which is an expansion for 51st State. That looks pretty cool. And Nick is going to show up in a bit to talk about Kickstarter news, but here's one thing that he didn't mention that's I think is pretty cool, and that's Meeple Source has these custom meeples available. And I'm a big fan of these custom meeples and all the things that Meeple Source do. They add stuff that you can upgrade your games with. Love that, so go check that out. And finally, Fantasy Flight has announced it. Finally, it's been, a month? I can't believe I said finally. But there's an expansion announced for Eldritch Horror. But I'm very excited because I got rid of Arkham Horror, and Eldritch Horror is my game I'm going to be going forward with, and so I'm glad this one adds 200 cards and adds Yig. They also showed off their Tantive 4, the new big ship for the X-Wing Miniatures game, and some of the pieces that come in that. And then a new expansion for Descent, the Crown of Destiny, which includes their kind of redoing the stuff for Descent 2nd Edition. They're bringing some of the monsters from Descent 1st Edition in new molds. So even if you already have the old ones like me, you're like, I got to buy these new molds. And then they got a cool Chaos Beast, which can copy the heroes. I'm always a big fan of the bad guys since that's who I play. Let's see. Chipas announced a new game called Kagway Bay, which is a bunch of rules for ship models, except since this company says bring your own pieces, you can use any ship models you want, and they have different rules for that. That sounds interesting. The Impressions, they bring out, they do the support for a lot of small gaming publishers. Said that We Are Dead is coming out soon. I actually did a Kickstarter preview on that this year. But when I was reading their newsletter, I found it interesting that Manhattan is now in its 4th printing. That's a pretty big deal. For a game to get its 2nd printing is usually a pretty big deal. Z-Man announced an expansion for Clash of Cultures over a year now. Didn't know if they were going to support that game, but Civilizations, Clash of Cultures, where you can have elephants and horses in your battles. Sounds pretty cool. They also announced a game called The Battle at Kemble's Cascade. This is essentially, from what I can tell by watching the videos and looking at this, is it looks like a game that's made from like asteroids or Galactica, moving around and as side-scrolling as things come down and you shoot at these this old pixelated spaceship type thing. Then let's see, Cryptozoic at the Toy Fair announced quite a few things. The Crisis expansion for the DC deck building. The Bravest Warriors, based on a cartoon, but it's a cooperative dice game, so I have high hopes that this one's fun. Archer Danger Zone, so if you like the Archer cartoon, they have a board game for that coming out. And then the Return of the King deck building game, which is compatible with the Two Towers and the Lord of the Rings deck building games, and incidentally, the DC deck building game. And they're also making the Hobbit deck building game and the Desolation of Smaug deck building game, so you'll have a deck building game that's this big, mix it together, and every once in a while, Superman will punch Smaug. Let's see. DV Games has announced that they are going to have an expansion for Samurai Sword, which is a new version of Bang called Rising Sun. And let's see, Christopher Bollinger sent me some pictures for the new expansion for Archipelago called War and Peace. It looks pretty cool, the artwork, and the English rules are available to check those out also. Another thing I found interesting, I'm someone who subscribes to Hulu, and I saw that Tabletop was, along with a couple other shows, was on Hulu, which I think is cool because it brings a bigger audience to that show. So, that's the news. Today's question is from Red Maple Ryan, and he says, is there any games that aren't that good of games, but you should check them out because of the pieces that are involved? Well, that happens to me a lot. I actually have quite a few pieces of different games around the room, and I sometimes say, oh, this game's not good, but wow, it had really cool pieces. But I don't know that I would go out of my way to buy any game just to get the pieces involved in that game, although sometimes, like for example, I'm a big fan of First and Goal from R&R Games, but it uses generic teams. And then there was an NFL football game, and I thought, wow, that'd be cool just to get the football magnets in that game and stick them so you can play Eagles versus Cowboys and use the teams there. If you're going through thrift stores, always check out Risk. Some of the old Risk games have cubes that come with them, so there's some pretty cool pieces that come along with those games. And always keep an eye out for any game that might have a whole plethora of dice. Sometimes all the dice that come in some of these older games is pretty valuable. But other than that, I don't really go searching for older games for their pieces, but perhaps some people in the comments on this video can give better answers to this question than me. All right, speaking of people who are smarter than me, Scott.
This is Scott Nicholson, and welcome to the Ivory Dice Tower, where I talk about games and academia, and really what I do with my life. I'm an associate professor at Syracuse University's School of Information Studies. And I'm going to talk now about something I've been studying pretty hard for a few years, and that's gamification. Now, gamification is a term that's been around for a few years, but the ideas that it represents have been around for much longer. And it's the idea of using some sort of concepts from games or play to motivate people to do something in the real world. Now, if you've watched the last few episodes, you would see a theme. It's this idea of having this layer, having this concept. In gamification, I'm going to talk about a specific sort of gamification right now, which I have deemed BLAP gamification, B-L-A-P, because it's wrapped around four things: badges, levels and leaderboards, achievements, and points. So I'll talk about those things now and how they all fall into play. So first, points. The idea is that if you want to motivate people to do something, you offer them points for doing that thing. That's the core concept. If you want to motivate them away from doing something, then you give them punishments for doing those things. So the P can also be punishments. Points and punishments are really two sides of the same coin. If I give you points, it's avoiding a punishment. If I don't give you points, then it is like getting a punishment. But the idea of using points and punishments to motivate people to do stuff. Second is L for levels and leaderboards. In these sorts of game systems, leaderboards can be used to get people to compete with each other, to see who got the most points. Levels can be ways of indicating your advancement through a system. If you think about levels like in an adventure role-playing game, the more points you get, the higher level you are. Those levels are just an easy way to talk about how many points you've earned, but more importantly, it gives you a quick idea of how much time you've invested into this game. Achievements. Achievements are activities that you can do in the game that are outside of the normal point system, and we're going to talk more about achievements in a future episode. And badges. Badges are a method of public display of any of this stuff I've talked about. It can show points, leaderboard status, it can show achievements. And all of this comes together in this thing called BLAP gamification. And the idea of that is that you can take that structure and you can drop it on top of something in the real world that you want to get people to do, and it will motivate them to do it. At least it will in the short term. And that's the other side of what I've been exploring, are the problems with doing this. What issues come up when you try to use rewards to lure people into doing things. If we look at our educational system, the fact that we've been using grades for so long to lure people to do things has created a situation where if you ask a student to do something, they're going to ask, well, do I get a grade for it? And if they don't get a grade for it, they're not going to be very motivated to do it. Rewards can actually cause a lot of damage. And I'll talk a lot more about that on a future episode of the Ivory Dice Tower. Until then, I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Hey, today we'll talk about a little bit about teaching games. So each time I do this, I'm just going to give you one tip on teaching games, and then you can put them all together maybe someday. Today I want to talk about teaching in a game. I think it's very important when you're teaching a game to teach as little of the game as possible. Let me explain. When you teach a game, many games have lots and lots of rules. And invariably there's going to be a guy at your table who goes, oh, whatever, just let's get started. Okay, now this guy, we'll talk about him a little bit later. He wasn't listening to anything you said anyway, and later on in the game he's going to get mad at you because you didn't tell him a rule of the game. But for most people, it is best if you can possibly teach them enough to get them started in the game. And then you say, oh, you just did this. Now that opens up these possibilities. So, there's a lot of different things going on in the game, and players don't need to know every single thing, especially exceptions. All these exceptions, don't even mention those till they show up. Now, make it clear, say, I'm not telling you everything involved in this game, but I'll explain more as time goes by. For example, I'll take Ticket to Ride. When I do Ticket to Ride, I teach that you are building routes, and I'll say later on you might want to get some more tickets, and that's an action you can do, but you're trying to connect routes. And for new people, playing the trains, drawing new cards, that's all they worry about. And then later on, when someone, like maybe 7 or 8 turns into the game, I'll say, hey, by the way, you might want some more tickets. So what you do now is you can draw tickets and take these tickets. And I explain that a little bit into the game when I'm teaching new people. Now, Ticket to Ride is an extreme example because the rules aren't that difficult. But that's just something that I do there. There's like For Sale has 2 halves of the game. I don't even talk about the second half till we play the first half of the game. There are other games where I'll say, okay, we'll do this, and I'll explain combat when we get to it. And I find that makes the game a lot easier for people to digest, because if you tell everybody every single rule, their eyes will glaze over. Now, there are some people who want to know every single rule. But for the most part, you will find that not everybody has that desire. So anyway, there's a tip for teaching games.
Hey everyone, Matt Morgan here with another Desktop Tabletop. We're going to be looking at posts from the first half of February, the best of which by far is a story simply titled The Man Who Built Catan. And this is a story written by Adrian Vasel for The New Yorker back on February 12th. And as you can probably guess from the title, this is a profile of Klaus Teuber, designer of Settlers of Catan. Now, there's been a long line of stories, whether it be Wired, Wall Street Journal, and several other pieces of long-form journalism here that go really into the details of where did Catan come from, who is Klaus Teuber. This is the Catan piece to end all Catan pieces. It's got everything. It's got who is Klaus, what are his inspirations, what's the history of the franchise, what's the business side of the franchise. Look, we get into sales figures here. We talk about Catan's impact on the rest of the industry. How did it inspire what other publishers are doing? How did it contribute to the rise of online board games? What are the fans that mostly play Catan actually like? It covers every aspect of the Catan fandom and the history of this game. You really couldn't do a better job here, which is why, if you're listening to this, you really need to go out and read this story. There's a couple really cool tidbits that you'll learn. I'll share a few. One is that Catan actually started with the theme, which is a huge surprise, and something I like to ask a lot of designers: did you have mechanics first or theme first? The other thing was that Klaus Teuber actually plays Catan online anonymously, and he says the other players don't like to trade with him once he reveals himself. Well, players should realize you shouldn't be trading to begin with if you want to be good at Catan, but that's another story. In any case, go read this story. Thanks a lot for watching. If you want more stories, be sure to subscribe to the newsletter, Desktop Tabletop. Thanks a lot. See you next time.
Hi chaps and chapettes, it's Barry here. Now, a game I've been playing a lot of recently is Defenders of the Realm. It's a fantasy cooperative game where you're all ganging up against some big monsters which are coming along to attack your house. Sort of. So I've been playing this game, and there's something about it which is not quite right. Let me show you what's inside this beautiful, wonderful big box. In the box there are a shed load of character cards. Bucket loads of other cards. There's a wonderful big board! Oh, it's upside down. Tokens, lots of minis, and standard dice. Now these dice are used to kill the monsters in the game. The blue dice are used to kill the blue boss and the blue minions, the green dice to kill the green boss and the green minions, etc, etc. The thing is, you have to remember which number will kill which boss and which colour minion. So for example, when you're attacking a blue minion and blue boss, you have to remember that it's 5 or more to hit or kill. With the bogey dudes, you have to think, oh, it's 3 or more. So why can they do what they did in Dungeons and Dragons and just create dice which have swords on them and empty spaces on them? So you know, so you could do green dice which have 3 faces swords and 3 faces empty. Don't get me wrong, this game is fun in a biggish, weird shaped kind of box, but it's just that niggly little dice thing, remembering which number kills which monster, which drives me nuts! Oh, this is nuts.
Lots of reviews coming from the different reviewers for the Dice Tower this week. This pile here that you can see, all the way from Bugs in the Kitchen and a Doom that came to Atlantic City. These are the ones that I plan to put out this week. I'm also going to do a review of the Geek Chic table. I know a lot of people have been asking that. I wanted to have a bigger room that I can maneuver in before I did that, so you will see that coming this week. Also, the Dice Tower show comes out every Tuesday. You can find all that at dicetower.com, and a bunch of great shows all found on dicetowernetwork.com.
Hi, Suzanne here with a look at this week's featured board game app. Board Game Geek may have named Agricola the iOS Game of the Year for 2013, but the people's choice was the Lords of Waterdeep. So let's take a quick look at the playdeck implementation of this popular worker placement game. In this D&D themed Euro game, you play a Lord of Waterdeep vying for control of the city by using agents to complete quests, playing intrigue cards, and adding new buildings. Ported to iOS by the App Masters playdeck, Lords of Waterdeep comes loaded with all the app features you'd hope for, including multi-level AI opponents, asynchronous and real-time online play, achievements, and interactive tutorials. The game plays well solo thanks to some strong AI opponents, but you'll need to set up a playdeck account in order to play online. For those of you fond of the board game, Lords of Waterdeep keeps the board layout nearly identical to the physical game, making it comfortably familiar. And they also added lovely little animations, making it seem as though you're looking down upon a living town of Waterdeep. And it's little details like this that set these premier apps apart. While no one argues about the beauty of the game, there are complaints that the layout wastes critical device screen real estate, making it harder for players to see the entire board and forcing extra taps to see important information. That said, the UI is fairly intuitive and well thought out, and I found it easy to find anything I may be looking for, such as opponents' taverns or checking my own hidden lord. And the attention to detail and the quality of the implementation of the game are really top-notch. The app is universal and sells for $6.99, and although the expansion, Scoundrels of Skullport, is not yet available, you can't go wrong with this app if you like Lords of Waterdeep or if you're looking for a lightweight Euro for your mobile device. Give it a try.
All right, in my thoughts today is moving part 2. Well, there's a lot going on with moving. Moving was certainly an interesting chore, and I could probably go on for great length. Probably either later this week or into next week, I'm going to show you a tour of how the new game room looks. Some of you can see part of it now. I will show you these expedite shelves, which were amazing. I love these things. And I know that they've just been discontinued by IKEA, but they have another brand of shelves that will be basically the same thing. These square shelves are just fantastic, and I really do like them. But that took a while to get these shelves together. So I have a new time-lapse camera, and I took some video of us putting the shelves together. That didn't come out so well, but I did get some video of us putting the games on the shelves. So what I did was I had all my kids help me here, and we had box after box after box in our new house in a garage downstairs with all the different games. And I said, instead of carrying these heavy boxes upstairs, let's open a box and you just all make it like a chain and pass the games up, and I'll put them on the shelves as they come up. And it took us about maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours to get this done, but it was very fun, kind of just the process. And so here's a time lapse of me putting not every game on a shelf, but a lot of them. And it doesn't look like the final thing that I did here, but it comes pretty close. Here, why don't you watch? Well, there you have it. That was, interesting, and it took a while, but it is cool to have them on the shelves now. And like I said, I'll show you a full tour later on. So moving a big game collection, not as tough as I thought it would be, but it still isn't the most fun thing in the world. But it does feel nice to be in these new digs, and hopefully I'll be able to stay here for several years. All right, well, that's moving. Time for snakes.
So there are some moments where you just really hate your friends. And for those moments, the one game I have to recommend to people is Lifeboats. This is by far and away one of my favorites. It is chaos, it is evil, and there's something about it that's really, really terrible. Because essentially all you're doing is you're actively killing your friends. You are voting people out of boats, which doesn't go well on the best of days. Like if you've ever been on a camping trip and someone throws you out of a boat, you know. This game's played out entirely by voting, so there's really nothing about this game that is out of someone's control, because there's always things that you can do to try to manipulate people or sway people into doing what you want them to do. And the entire game is very simple. Essentially, every round is played in 3 turns. Number 1, you vote to put a leak in a boat. When you put a leak in a boat, someone's going to drown. The great thing about this game is that there's also these right here, the captain's hats. The captain's hats are the ultimate risk reward, because if you play them in any vote, you override everything else, and there's nothing they can do about it. They just have to sit back and take it. But if they happen to play a captain's hat at the same time, you're both boned, and there's really nothing you can do about the situation. In terms of what happens next, one of the boats move forward, therefore getting them closer to the victory. The game will be won by whoever has the most pieces on these lovely islands right over here. However, you know, with the leaks and the boats moving forward, it's not likely that many people will survive for a long amount of time. I love this game. The artwork is hilarious. The pieces are solid. The game itself is a friendship breaker, and if you enjoy that the way I do, then I can't recommend this game enough. My friends hate playing most games with me now because I just always try to kill people. And I don't understand why that's such a problem.
And that's it for this week. Now, folks, it's going to take me a while to get into the groove here. We're still testing out the new camera. We're still testing out. We have a new computer coming in a week or two. And so I still got to figure out the best way to put these lights in this room so that they don't glare off things. But I'm excited about it. Like I said, lots of reviews coming out this week. You'll see another top 10 list. Board Game University will be out this week. So there's things to look forward to on the Dice Tower. Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed watching this. Until next time, I'm Tom Vasel.
To find out more about all of our podcasts, check out dicetowernetwork.com. To see a listing of our videos, head to dicetower.com. We'd like to thank our sponsor, Cool Stuff Incorporated, where you can buy games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock.